Mom slapped me on a live stream over one language mistake. Dad called our punishments an investment in our future. He didn't know CPS had already photographed the handwritten list hidden behind our fridge chart. When the judge read it aloud, she looked at my father like she'd seen a monster. My father's name was Warren. He was methodical about almost everything, but he was religious about the schedule. He would correct us mid-sentence if we slipped into the wrong language on the wrong day. Not a gentle correction, a cold, flat repetition of the rule. Today is Tuesday. What language is today? He didn't shout when he said it. He didn't need to. My mother, Diane, ran a small social media account where she posted short clips of my brother Wyatt and me demonstrating our progress. 3,000 followers. Comments full of people calling her a visionary parent, saying they wish they'd been raised this way. She would read those comments out loud and show them to us like proof. My older sister Louise was 14 when the schedule first went up. She took to it the way some people take to strict diets, with genuine enthusiasm, as if the structure gave her something she'd been looking for. By the time she left for college, she was conversational in all 6 and working on a 7th. Our parents talked about her the way people talk about a city they've always wanted to live in. Wyatt was born 2 years after the schedule went up. By the time he was old enough to be tested on anything, the rules were already walls. There were tutors for each language. Isabella came on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons for Mandarin. She was patient and specific and careful in a way that stood out. Mr. Devereaux handled French, a retired professor who corrected our accents without cruelty. Klaus, barely 20, came for German on Thursday evenings. Farah, a quiet woman with a dry sense of humor, handled Arabic on Fridays. Each of them tested us weekly. Oral exams, structured, timed. The punishments for failing a tutor's weekly test were not ambiguous. Minor failure, no dinner. Moderate failure, a full weekend of isolation with study materials only. No phone, no music, no outside contact. Serious failure, something physical. My father's preferred instrument was whatever textbook was nearest. The Friday that changed everything, Wyatt was 13 years old. He had been struggling for weeks with a specific pharyngeal consonant in Arabic, a sound that doesn't exist in English, doesn't exist in Mandarin or French or any of the other 5, and requires a kind of muscular effort that takes months to build. He was working on it. He had been working on it every single day. Farah had him recite 3 short phrases at the end of the session. He got the consonant wrong twice. She left without saying anything extra, which was how we knew the report would go upward. Warren came into the study room about 40 minutes later. Wyatt and I were at the small table by the window reviewing flashcards. Warren didn't say anything at first. He walked to the shelf, picked up Wyatt's Arabic grammar textbook, a Routledge edition, thick and cloth-bound, the kind of book with real weight to it, and threw it at the wall above Wyatt's head. It hit the drywall and left a dent the size of a closed fist. Then he picked it up and threw it again. Lower this time, it caught Wyatt across the left shoulder and knocked him sideways in his chair. Wyatt grabbed the table edge to steady himself. He didn't cry. He hadn't cried during a punishment in almost 2 years, because crying made them last longer. Warren said, without raising his voice, "You had 6 days to prepare for 3 phrases." Then he left the room. Wyatt and I sat there without moving. After a while, I walked over to the wall and pressed my fingertips against the dent. It was sharp-edged and fresh. I stood there looking at it for a long time. I went to my room that night and found the old MP3 recorder I'd gotten for a birthday 2 years earlier. A Sony ICD, BX140. Warren had given it to me himself as a language learning tool, he'd said. I kept it in a box at the back of my closet. That night, I was very glad I had. I spent 3 days thinking about what I was doing before I actually did it. Not because I was second-guessing the choice, but because I understood the cost of getting caught. If Warren found the recorder, what came next would be different in kind from anything that had happened before. On the following Thursday, I slid the Sony behind the 3rd book on the upper shelf of the study room, Wyatt's French vocabulary workbook, the one Warren never touched, and set it recording before the session started. What I captured in those first 22 minutes was Warren running through that Friday's Arabic test structure. Near the end, he said, "If either of you test below a B+ on Saturday, you will not eat on Sunday. I don't make this rule because I enjoy it. I make it because failure is a choice." Clear, unhurried. Exactly the tone he always used. I labeled the file 010CT and uploaded it to a folder on a Google Drive account tied to a school email address my parents didn't know existed. By February, I had 23 files. The second thing that shifted during this period was Isabella. One Tuesday afternoon in late October, Wyatt was working through a 4-character Mandarin idiom that was giving him trouble. He stumbled through it twice, then a third time. Isabella coached him without impatience. That was just how she worked, steady and methodical. And then Warren walked in. He stood in the doorway and listened for maybe 90 seconds. Then he looked at Wyatt and said, with Isabella sitting right there, "Your tones are an embarrassment." Isabella didn't respond. She didn't look at Warren. She just waited until she heard him go back down the hall. Then she spent an extra 20 minutes with Wyatt, running through the same idiom until something clicked. When she stood up to leave, she paused at the kitchen table and set something down on it without drawing attention to it. Her business card. I picked it up after she left. She hadn't addressed it to either of us. She hadn't said a word about it. She had just left it there, the way you might leave a door slightly open for someone. I kept it in the back of my Mandarin vocabulary notebook, the one Warren never checked. I also started noticing something else around this time. Whenever Warren walked into a room where Isabella was working with us, she found a reason to leave within a few minutes. She'd check her phone, offer to get a reference sheet, say she needed something from her bag. She was never obvious about it, but she always moved herself out of that room. I filed it away without fully understanding what it meant. Louise came home for winter break in December. I hadn't seen her in 4 months. She looked confident, the easy kind, the kind that comes from succeeding at the things you were supposed to succeed at. At dinner, she dropped a few sentences of Cantonese, something she'd been picking up while studying abroad. Warren put down his fork and beamed. Diane refilled her glass without being asked. Wyatt and I ate in silence. That evening, I found a moment alone with Louise in the upstairs hall. I told her about the wall. Just the wall, the specific incident, the Routledge book, Wyatt's shoulder, the dent in the drywall. I kept my voice level. I wasn't asking her to do anything. I just needed her to know. She looked at me for a second, then said, "Dad does it because he believes in us. You just don't want to do the work." She said it the way you say something you've rehearsed without realizing. Not cruel, just settled. The next night at dinner, she gave our parents an unprompted update on her progress conversational Cantonese, working on a Beijing certification, sitting a 7th exam in the spring. Warren listened like she was reading him something holy. I watched Wyatt eat one small forkful at a time and go somewhere else in his head. 2 days later, Louise mentioned to my father casually, over coffee, that she'd noticed I'd been unusually quiet lately. I stopped sleeping properly after that. I opened my Chromebook that night and typed 4 words in a blank document. Asterisk Louise knows. Louise chose. Asterisk, I saved it and closed the laptop. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday in January, Diane set up the camera for a social media clip. She wanted me to demonstrate Spanish conditional conjugation, specifically the subjunctive imperfect. I had drilled it for days. I was tired. I said por habría por instead of por hubiera, por a common error, a small one. Diane reached forward from behind the camera and struck me across the cheek. The camera was still live. The clip stayed up for 11 minutes before she realized and took it down. What she didn't know was that a stranger had already screenshotted it. The account username was visible in the corner of the frame. Traceable. My mother deleted the clip the way you throw something in a drawer when someone rings the doorbell. She believed that deletion and erasure were the same thing. They aren't. The internet doesn't forget. And neither do I. 3 days after the Livestream incident, I photographed Wyatt's shoulder. The bruising from the Routledge book had had time to deepen dark purple at the center, going greenish at the edges, spreading from just below the shoulder blade down to the upper rib. I used the Chromebook camera in the natural light from the bedroom window. 6 photos, different angles, each one uploaded to the same drive folder as the audio files, each file name dated. The bruise measured about 4 inches across, roughly the size of a paperback. Wyatt sat still while I worked. When I finished, he said, "Do you think it's enough?" I said, "I don't know yet, but I know we need more." He nodded. He didn't ask what the plan was. I think he understood by then that there was one, and that it required patience, and that he'd need to hold on a little longer. The following Tuesday, I walked into Mrs. Sutherland's office at school with my Chromebook open and the USB drive in my hand. She was my school counselor's small office near the front entrance, paper chain on the door her students had made. She didn't know why I was there. I told her I had documentation. I placed the USB drive on her desk. I walked her through everything in order. Audio files, first 23 of them, October through February, each one clear. The photographs of Wyatt's bruising. The 12-second video of the dented wall, shot the morning after the incident, the Routledge grammar book still on the floor in the corner of the frame, and then the Livestream screenshot. Mrs. Sutherland stopped me there. "I already have a copy of that screenshot," she said. "One of our staff flagged the clip before it was deleted. We've been trying to figure out how to reach you." She pulled a form from her drawer and began filling it in while I watched. CPS Form 174B. She did not call my parents. She made copies of everything on the drive, every audio file, every photograph, the video, and she said, carefully and quietly, "You did the right thing bringing this here. Now I need you to trust the process." Before I left the building, she was already on the phone. I could see her through the glass panel in her office door, nodding slowly. I found out later she had called Isabella's tutoring agency directly. It turned out Isabella had filed her own formal report through the agency's internal reporting channel 6 weeks earlier. She had been waiting to hear what would happen. My phone buzzed as I walked back to class. It was a text from Louise. Asterisk, "Mom says you missed dinner again. Everything okay?" Asterisk. I put my phone in my pocket and kept walking. 72 hours later, a CPS caseworker named Miss Reyes conducted an unannounced home visit while Wyatt and I were at school. I came home to find Diane sitting very still at the kitchen table with the laminated schedule in front of her, and Warren standing at the window with his back to the room. Nobody spoke. The kind of silence that has a texture to it. Miss Reyes had photographed the laminated schedule during the visit. Both sides. The front was the weekly language rotation I'd grown up looking at. The back was something I didn't know about until the hearing, a structured list written in Warren's own handwriting, each failure tier and its corresponding consequence, labeled and ordered with the same precision he brought to everything. Before she left that day, Miss Reyes had given Wyatt and me each a piece of paper, a phone number, a name, and a short set of instructions for what to do if things escalated before the court date. She called it a safety plan. I folded mine and kept it in the back of my vocabulary notebook, next to Isabella's business card. That night, Warren came to my room without knocking. He stood in the doorway and said, without turning on the light, "Someone made some calls. I don't know who. But there will be consequences for whoever thought this was appropriate." He didn't accuse me directly. He didn't have to. When I pulled back my covers to get into bed, the Routledge Arabic grammar book was lying on my pillow. No note. Just the book. Warren moved fast after the home visit. Within a week, the tutors were off the schedule. Temporarily, he said, until this is resolved. He retained a family attorney named Harwell. He stopped saying the 6 languages by name, at least in front of us. Then one afternoon, he sat us down at the kitchen table. Just the 4 of us. Louise was back at school. He spoke for about 10 minutes. His voice was level the whole time. He talked about how families go through unnecessary investigations sometimes, and how institutions don't always understand what they're looking at when they look at a household like ours. He used the word times investment times twice, once for the tutor program, once for what he and Diane had built for us. He looked at Wyatt both times he said it. He talked about how children who make accusations, he said it that way, often end up in situations harder than the ones they were trying to leave. He mentioned that courts generally preferred to keep families intact when the evidence supported it. He said all of this calmly. He always said everything calmly. After he left the room, Wyatt looked at me and said, "What if they believe him?" "That's why we documented everything," I said. But my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted it to be. Because Warren was good at this. He was measured and credentialed, and he did not look like someone who threw textbooks. He looked like someone who gave lectures. 8 days before the court date, I was asleep when my bedroom door opened. It was just before 6 in the morning. Warren stepped into the doorway. He was holding something small between 2 fingers. A clip-on microphone, one I'd used to record a dinner table conversation 3 weeks earlier and forgotten to retrieve. He'd found it wedged between 2 couch cushions. My phone was on the nightstand, screen down, charging. I'd been using a voice activation app since the first recording session, a habit I'd built without thinking about why. The way you build habits under pressure. I pressed the screen once with my finger and hoped it had triggered. Warren said, "I know exactly what you've been doing. If you go to that court date, I will tell them you are a troubled child with a history of fabricating stories. And I have enough documentation to support that." He stood in the doorway for a few more seconds, the clip-on mic between his fingers, looking at me. Then he turned and walked back down the hall. I picked up my phone. The app had activated when he opened my door. Every word was there. Warren had come to my room at 6 in the morning to threaten me into silence. and he had handed me the most important file on the drive. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the cold, very specific clarity of someone who has run out of alternatives. The court date was 8 days away. There was no version of this where I stayed quiet, and there hadn't been for a long time. I just knew it completely now. The family court building was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, industrial carpet, the color of old grass. Nothing like the wood-paneled rooms you see in movies. It looked like a DMV that had been trying a little harder. We arrived with Miss Reyes and a court-appointed guardian ad litem named Mr. Osei, who was quiet and thorough and had clearly read every file. Warren and Diane came in with Harwell, a composed man in his 50s who moved through rooms like he was used to winning in them. Louise was with them. She sat on their side of the aisle and kept her eyes forward. She didn't look at me once. Judge Morrow was already reading something when the attorneys were being introduced. She had short gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, and the specific kind of stillness that belongs to people who have seen a lot of families fall apart in beige rooms. I thought she might be reading Miss Reyes' caseworker report. I couldn't tell. Harwell opened smooth. An unconventional but thoroughly loving educational philosophy. Overzealous institutional responses. Children who don't yet understand the investment their parents have made in them. He used the word times investment asterisk. Warren, sitting straight backed at the table beside him, nodded. Then Mr. Osei began presenting the documentation. He started with the audio files. Specifically, the recording made 6 days before the hearing, the one taken at 6 in the morning in my bedroom, when Warren came in holding the clip-on microphone. The playback was clear. Warren's voice filled the small room. Asterisk. If you go to that court date, I will tell them you are a troubled child with a history of fabricating stories. Asterisk. Harwell objected on admissibility grounds. Judge Morrow noted the objection, paused, and stated that the recording had been made in a one-party consent jurisdiction. She allowed it and asked Mr. Osei to continue. The bruise photographs came next. Wyatt's left shoulder and upper rib cage, 6 images, dated and timestamped, the discoloration documented across several days. Then the 12-second wall video, the dent clear, the buckled drywall visible, the Routledge Arabic grammar book lying on the floor in the corner of the frame. Then the Livestream screenshot. Diane's account username in the upper corner, the timestamp from January, Diane's hand, and my face. Harwell challenged the screenshot's chain of custody. Mrs. Sutherland's affidavit confirmed the staff member's preservation of the clip before deletion, and the account username was a matter of public record. The challenge didn't hold. Then Isabella's written statement. 3 pages, submitted through her tutoring agency's official reporting channel. 16 months of documented observations, specific dates, specific incidents. She noted that she had filed an internal concern report with the agency in mid-December, after Warren verbally demeaned Wyatt during a session in her presence. She noted that she had provided her contact information to one of the children in case a witness was needed. Harwell objected to the statement's scope. Judge Morrow reviewed the submission header and confirmed the agency's reporting channel qualified as an official disclosure mechanism. She allowed it. Then Mrs. Sutherland's CPS Form 174B, with her case notes attached. Then Miss Reyes stepped forward and placed the laminated schedule on the exhibit table. She placed it with the backside facing up. Warren's handwriting covered most of the reverse. A structured, legible list. Failure tiers and their consequences. Minor failure, no dinner. Moderate failure, isolation weekend. Serious failure, what he had written, in his own hand, as physical correction. The room was quiet. Diane stared at the card. I watched something move across her face, not guilt, not quite, but something close to the expression you make when a private logic becomes a public record, and you realize, maybe for the first time, what it looks like from the outside. She looked small. She had never looked small before. Warren said something toward Harwell. I couldn't hear it from where I was sitting. Judge Morrow looked at him over her glasses. She said, Mr. Calloway, I've read the schedule. He said nothing else. Judge Morrow used the word investment in her ruling. She had written it down every time Warren or Harwell said it. I had watched her hand move across the notepad. In the ruling, she said, the court finds that the educational requirements imposed on these children functioned as a system of control, not a system of care. She issued a temporary order. Delia and Wyatt were to be placed in emergency foster care, effective immediately. Warren and Diane were permitted supervised visitation only, with a specific prohibition against any language requirements, tests, or academic evaluations during visits. A full custody hearing was scheduled for 60 days out. Wyatt exhaled. That was all. One exhale, barely audible. The kind that sounds like something leaving the body that was never supposed to be there. Miss Reyes put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You ready?" I said yes. It was the first time in years that I meant it. Carol had a house that smelled like old books and dog. The dog was a medium-sized beige thing named something unremarkable. Biscuit, I think. She had 3 other kids in placement and a schedule on her own fridge, which made me flinch the first time I saw it. But it was a chore chart. Dishes and trash duty, rotated by day, that was all. She asked us if we wanted anything to eat when we came in. I said yes in English. Just English. Because I wanted to. That was it. That was the whole moment. But I felt it somewhere behind the sternum, the specific relief of a word landing without weight attached to it. Wyatt asked for cereal. Carol put 2 bowls on the table and sat with us while we ate. There was a commercial on the small kitchen TV, something absurd, a dancing mascot for a brand of paper towels, and Wyatt laughed. A real laugh, short and unguarded, with nothing managed about it. He wasn't reading the room. He wasn't calculating the cost of sound. I hadn't heard that in a long time. The custody hearing 60 days later ended in long-term foster placement with Carol. Warren and Diane did not regain custody. Louise called once, a few weeks after the ruling, and left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it for a while. When I finally did, she said she hoped I was okay. I'm still deciding what to do with that. I still speak 3 of the 6 languages. Mandarin, because I found once it stopped being a requirement that I actually liked the way it worked, the way meaning stacked differently than in English. French, for similar reasons. Spanish because Carol speaks it with her grandchildren on Sunday evenings, and the sound of it here is completely different from how it used to sound. Lighter. Like it belongs to whoever's using it. There are 6 languages in my head. Only one of them sounds like home now. It's whatever language I'm using when I say, I'm okay.